Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the New York Yankees Recaps podcast. I haven't done a long form podcast in like 2 months. I think April 10th was the last episode. And obviously that was just a few weeks into quarantine. I think everything shut down around March 12th. That's when the basketball games kind of ended halfway through and they shut down spring training the next day, so everybody was starting to freak out. It was like, okay, this has never happened before. What the hell is going on? So that was March 12th. And, obviously, there hasn't been much to recap. So I figured, take a break from the long form podcasts. I started doing the top 5 videos, started, doing a few more of those short documentaries. So that's kind of what I've been working on, trying to get my video skills better so that when the season does come back, the game day show, the recaps of the games can be that much better and that much more professional. So that's what I've been working on. Also, there's just been a ton of stuff in culture, and I'll get to the protests and all that stuff in a minute. But, we had Tiger King with Joe Exotic. That was amazing. If you haven't seen that on Netflix, it's like a 10-part series, maybe 11-part series. It talks about this guy Joe Exotic who ran a tiger zoo in Florida. Tigers. I mean, it was just a zoo. I mean, they had alligators, a bunch of other stuff. But he's also like a total weirdo. I mean, he's got this crazy mullet, and he makes these music videos where he's singing, but it's not really him singing. He's just lip syncing. But it was crazy. And then there was like a murder for hire plot where he tried to kill the owner of another zoo, allegedly. Well, I guess not allegedly. He got convicted. He's in prison for it right now. He liked to blow stuff. So Tiger King is, if you haven't seen it, spend the time watching it, because it is a piece of culture that we're all gonna look back on as during quarantine. That's what people were into. And then also the 10-part series from ESPN that got moved up, The Last Dance, which was the documentary that was filmed during Michael Jordan's final season with the Bulls before he retired for the second time. How great would it have been if he never retired the first time? They could have had 9 straight championships. I know a lot of you guys are Knicks fans, but I grew up watching Michael Jordan and the Bulls. He was the guy. So even though I wasn't from Chicago, I always rooted for the Bulls because I like Michael Jordan so much. I like to see the best players succeed and go deep into the playoffs and win championships. And certainly Michael Jordan was the one who dominated basketball during the 90s. So The Last Dance was amazing. I got addicted to that for a while. We had all sorts of drama politically. I know people have different feelings politically, so I'm not going to, talk too much about politics on this podcast. But there was the whole shutdown, and then there was the groups of protesters who were protesting the shutdown, and then we had Dr. Fauci, who seemed like the most reasonable expert on the coronavirus. He's telling us one thing, and then the president, who's standing right next to him, is telling us a different thing. Everybody's confused. We're seeing the death toll go up, and it's just a scary number to look on the news and see 1,000 people. That's like, 5 plane crashes a day of people just dying from this new disease that nobody really knew, exactly how you get it or exactly who could be affected. It sounds now that we have been exposed to this for a while and more research is being done, that, it disproportionately affects those who are unhealthy, severely overweight, or have like an asthma or something that affects their respiratory system, if they have cancer, if they have a pre-existing condition that's pretty bad, or if they're old. I think the median age of folks who died from COVID was like 81, and life expectancy is like 80. So I think you're seeing a lot more of the younger crowd starting to go back out. You're seeing people wear masks when they go out. I've gone out a few times. I haven't gone out to do anything social yet. I went to the grocery store a few times. I went out to Lowe's to pick up some stones. I'm building a fire pit in my backyard, and we got some mulch and things like that. So I've been out a few times, but I've mostly tried to keep my distance from people, wear the mask. I think I'm gonna be okay if I get this. My screensaver just went on. Hang on, I'm going to fix that. I think I'm going to be okay if I somehow get COVID. I'm not super worried, but if I get it and I'm not symptomatic, I don't want to spread it to anyone else. So that's why I wear a mask. I don't want to make anyone else sick. But right now, I mean, you're seeing protests everywhere because of the George Floyd thing, and people aren't wearing masks. And it makes me wonder, why can't we just have crowds? Why can't we have baseball and sports, with some crowds? If people can get out there and protest, you can go sell every third seat at a ballpark. I mean, you can do that. So, with the exceptions maybe being families can be together, right? So if you buy a group of tickets, you can buy 5 or 6 tickets. Maybe they sell a maximum of 5 seats together or something like that. I don't know what it is. There's a solution, though, and they've got to come up with something because I'm dying for a little baseball. But how crazy are these protests here over the last few weeks? I mean, I got to say, I agree with the protests. I moved from New York to North Carolina in 1997, so 23 years ago this June, or this July. I can't remember exactly when it was. It was after school ended. And the casual racism in the South just was mind-boggling to me. It was just mind-boggling. Now, that's not an indictment of the entire South or everybody in North Carolina even. It was a very small percentage of people, but it was definitely there, and it was definitely in the open, which is something that was new to me. And I've never felt comfortable with racism. I've never felt comfortable when, you're in the all-boys group and, somebody makes a racist comment or whatever, just a racist joke. I've never felt comfortable with that. And I'm going to go out of my way to speak up even more, if I'm ever in situations like that and somebody, makes an off-color joke or whatever, I'm going to be less tolerant of intolerance. That's the part that I can play. But we've got to, as a society, just start seeing each other as connected. I really think that, life, all life is connected. We all have common ancestors. We can trace the entire genome. People look different. Some people have more pigment, some people have less, some people have no hair, some people have lots of hair, some people are blue-eyed, and some people have brown eyes. People just are different, but we're all human beings. And we've just got to start seeing each other as human beings whose lives and whose happiness and whose well-being is valued by all. And until we can do that, we're not going to make the kind of progress that we need to make as a society. So I support the protesters. I wish there wouldn't be looting, but you know what? I also wish there wouldn't be, black men choked to death in the street. And I think that if you got to break a few windows to get people's attention, so be it. So be it. One thing that's odd about this is, this has happened a lot. There's been a lot of people that have been killed by the police, and there's not that much attention paid to it, or it goes away after a couple days. But there's been this overwhelming surge of support for the black community over the last, I guess, couple weeks, 10 days or so. And I think one of the reasons it was so shocking is that there was high definition video of this guy being executed in the street. And the cops' expressions on their faces, just their blank expressions of apathy towards this man's life, while he was absolutely terrified and suffering. And a lot of people have never seen that type of thing on their TV in high definition, just the fragility of life, the human condition. I wrote a book a few years ago called We're All Gonna Die, Musings on the Human Condition. I wrote it because I've always been fascinated by our mortality and the fact that we're here for such a limited time, and that we, that we're conscious, but nobody really understands why or where consciousness comes from. Is it just a bunch of feedback loops? Our ability to calculate, our surroundings in 3D space, or is the brain an antenna for, some kind of a a consciousness of the universe, and the individual I, the ego, is only represented in the brain. And maybe once we die, we go back into the ether of the universe, and maybe maybe every time someone is born or anything is born, it's an I, it's an ego, because it has a brain. And so it always experiences that individuality, while it's trapped in physical form. So, that's something that always fascinated me. And I think people seeing the mortality, seeing a life extinguished and how fragile it can be. You see the man peeing on himself, and, I'm not going to show it, but the pee dripping down the sidewalk. I think, people seeing that, and people hearing him call for his mother, who's long since deceased. I think that freaked people out. And it was the wake-up call that the society needed to understand the fragile nature of life, more so than in the past. And you're seeing corporations get behind it. You're seeing more politicians like Mitt Romney, who's he's on the conservative side, and he's not really a friend of Black Lives Matter. Well, yesterday he marched with them. So I just think you're seeing what's called a cascading regime shift. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it was in a book I read called Generations. It talks about how at times throughout history, certain events will spark a wave, like a domino effect, where it cascades through society, where there are major changes. Now, we saw it with the Me Too thing. After Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby, women were like, I've had it. We saw a lot more women elected. We saw a lot more women speak up about the things that they had gone through in their past, to show solidarity for one another, but also to call out the perpetrators. I don't know where I'm going with all this, but I just, society's always been messy, and right now we're seeing different types of messes, but I firmly believe that there will be good that comes from all of this, because human nature at its core is good. We want good. We want people to be happy. We realize, even if it's on a subconscious level, that we're all kind of connected. That there's something deeper than just, these meat bodies that we're in that are mostly made up of water and empty space. And there's something, alive about our consciousness, and that allows us to animate, and that allows us to interact and learn about the universe. And I think there's, some people are very religious and some people aren't, but I think somewhere everybody kind of realizes that there's something deeper that we're not really sure what it is. Maybe we're living in a simulation, and maybe it's impossible to know that we're living in a simulation because it's a closed system. If I were designing a universe simulator, I would want things that were in that universe to, be locked in that universe and not be able to leave. So, I think that there's something strange going on. We're all connected in some fashion, but for some reason we also war with each other. Everybody and everything is in conflict. Even the biomes in our gut, they're fighting with each other. Our body has an immune system. Our cells are fighting. We don't realize it's happening. Maybe we are just, the components of something else, and we're at war with each other, but it's part of something bigger. It's part of something that is more complex than us. Maybe the universe or the earth itself. There's bigger consciousnesses out there of which we're probably a part. And I think you're seeing a shift in the consciousness of society. There's more people realizing, hey, we are equal to one another, and two things that are equal to one another cannot be different, right? They are equal to the same thing. And I think that it's important to realize that, no matter, what differences we have, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We all have a finite physical existence, and we know very little about the universe as a whole. So I think we need to stop being so egocentric and stop thinking about, what's different about us, and start thinking about, what connects us, what can bring us together, and what can make us better. And until we do that, society is going to be a mess. But I strongly believe that we will get there. Might not happen in our lifetimes, but there's definitely positive changes happening in society right now. All right, so let's talk a little baseball, because that's what this is, after all, baseball podcast. Now, there's been nothing to recap. I picked the worst possible name for this channel. It's too late to rename it, though. I've already done a ton of branding, made a ton of logos, and put my logo on mugs. I don't know where my mug is, but it's too late now. And eventually there will be games to recap, and I'm hoping that it will be this season, that it will happen. I'm hearing a lot more skepticism from guys like Tim McCarver and the different guys on MLB Network. So here's the deal. When this whole shutdown happened, it became evident that fans were not going to be a major factor at ballparks for a long time. Now, I think you can still put people in there, but either way, attendance is going to be way down. So the owners were going to lose money. We were going to have to shut down half the season at least. And one of the umpires, when baseball was dismissed in March, said, "See you guys in June." Well, it might be more like July, or it might be more like March or February, because they're arguing over the money now, which is a bad look at a time when there's 40 million people out of work and people are struggling all over the country. People are losing their businesses. To say, well, I won't play baseball for $2 million when I'm supposed to make $10 million. And I get it. 20 cents on the dollar is a big pay cut. And I'll get to that in a second. But it's a bad look to cancel the season over money. It's bad for the players, and it's bad for the owners. Get it together. Get it together and come to an agreement. There's been talk of maybe doing a tournament or a 50-game season. I say you got to do 80 games. I mean, otherwise, what's the point? Last year, in the first 50 games of the year, the Nationals were something like 20-30 or 19-31, and they won the World Series. You can't determine a baseball season in 50 games. And in the beginning of this shutdown, before I'd had a lot of time to think about it, I thought any amount of baseball will be good. But now you have a real opportunity to get in half a season, to get in 3 months of baseball, and to really get guys in mid-season form as you enter an expanded playoffs. That will be so much fun. So much fun. But it sounds like greed might get in the way, as it often does. And here's what's happening. The players and the owners agreed on a certain amount for the players' salaries for this season. I think it was just a prorated salary for whenever the season would resume. But the fact that there weren't going to be fans in the stands, I don't think was considered. And so there's going to be a ton less revenue now. And so the owners have the option of either taking a loss and paying the players what they agreed to, or they could just cut their losses and cancel the entire season. Now, I don't think either side wants to cancel the entire season. I mean, you don't buy a baseball team unless you love baseball, but you might love making money more, who knows? And the baseball players, they don't want to cancel the season. I mean, it's tough to go an entire year without playing baseball and then to resume. This will end a lot of guys' careers. Some money's better than no money, you got to imagine. And we've already seen this was devastating for the minor league rosters. Tons of guys have retired and been released, things like that. So I don't think anybody wants to cancel the entire season outright. So I think there is plenty of motivation to come to some kind of an agreement. Now, what will that look like? I think you're going to see them compromise. I think you're going to maybe see, 70, 75 games. Financially, I mean, they're just going to have to come to a number that works for everybody. The owners are probably going to lose a little bit of money this year. You can't lose, half or all of your fans and still make money. I mean, that's just not how it works. But there's an opportunity to get, TV revenue. And I honestly think there's an opportunity for some fans. I mean, we're seeing people out in the street protesting. We're seeing bars open back up. People are willing to take calculated risks. I think if you sold every fourth seat in a stadium, I think you'd get enough individual buyers that, you'd sell 10,000 seats or you'd sell 8,000 seats. And for those fans who went, it would be a better experience. Let's be honest, less parking, less lines to the bathrooms, I mean, less lines at the vending counters. You'd have more space. You'd be able to get a foul ball if there's one hit to your section. I mean, that would be a better experience. Now, it won't be as loud. You won't have the energy. Sorry if it's loud. There's a dump truck right outside my house. You wouldn't get the energy from the crowd that you normally would, but it's still a chance to go see the stadium, and to, feel the grandness of being in a Major League Baseball stadium. There's nothing like it. And even when it's empty, it's just an amazing sight, especially Yankee Stadium. So I think there's an opportunity to get fans. If you're creative enough, a lot of places are lifting the bans on gatherings up to certain amounts. And like I said, people are willing to take a calculated risk. You know that if you're going out to a game or you're going out to a bar or whatever, you're not going to go visit your 102-year-old grandma. You're going to try and be safe and be careful. And I think that, there are protocols that stadiums can put into place where there's hand sanitizers in every section. And you can only walk up and down, the aisles in one direction. Things like that. There are ways to do it, and there are people who study this type of thing who are experts, much more so than I am, that can figure it out and should figure it out so that we can all have baseball again. So I wanted to take a second to thank everybody who's been tuning in over the last few months and sticking with the channel. We were one of the fastest growing channels on YouTube for the first 3 months of 2020, and then coronavirus hit, and I mean, numbers have plummeted. So the people who have stuck around, I wanted to say thank you. And please continue to tune in. Whenever we do have baseball, I will have a recap of every single game. I'm going to try and post it after the game. It might go up the next morning. I haven't really decided. I'm going to have to do a little bit of both, a little A and B testing to see which audience, which time release gets more views and helps grow the channel more. But I am committed to, whenever we have baseball, doing recap shows and commentary on every single game, every single trade. I mean, that's another thing. Trades. Are trades going to happen this year? You can't just send somebody to a new city, or it's just going to be odd. One of the things we heard is that you might have a 20 or 30-man roster and a 20-man taxi squad, in case people get sick or whatever. So this is a really, really strange year, and I'm looking forward to covering it once it starts. Everybody stay strong. I know that things have been tough. I know that a lot of people are out of work and a lot of people are upset at the news. But hang in there, because, over time, things tend to trend towards improvement for society, for human beings. We're living in the best time that we've ever lived in on this planet, aside from the environment, which we're slowly killing. But aside from that, everything's great. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.